It's a little bit like deja vu because I was moderating a panel yesterday, exact the same time, the same room about user acquisition. So I guess I have different people now with me. But so panelists, there's Päivi from Unity, Johan from Chartboost, Pascal from Eating Games, and then Robert from Next Games. Well, these guys getting kind of comfortable. So my background, I used to run, back at the days, I used to run Unity ads. Well, actually already at Amplifier, I used to run the BD. Moved on to Outwit 7 as my Talking Dom guys. I was their CRO for a while. And about a year ago, moved back to Finland and then started, doing different things, including advising games companies, helping them to grow, doing a little bit of marketing automation projects and stuff like that. And obviously, glad to be here. And some of these guys I've known for years. So even some of them I hired. I would hire again, right? So, but to kick things off, maybe you guys can just introduce yourself quickly, like your role, what are you doing in your companies and stuff like that.
Is this working? Hi, I'm Päivi. I work at Unity Ads as the senior account manager, and my daily work is to talk to developers who are on their UA stuff.
Yeah, I'm Johan. I'm a general manager for Chartboost Europe, and yeah, I'm similar to Päivi. I also talk to developers on UA stuff.
So I'm Pascal Clarice. I'm the CMO of Eden Games, among other things, and I consult for a bunch of other developers on marketing.
And I'm Robert Lagos. I do all kinds of UA at Next Games.
Cool lineup. So there's a clear difference of service providers and the people who actually do the work, right? Nah, just kidding. By the way, are there many indies in the room? Not too many indies, no? Oh, there are. Oh, cool. That's cool. So we have about 37 minutes. I was thinking of trying to keep it in a 30-ish. So we have still time for some questions maybe later. But to kick things off, maybe just to kind of set the really basis, and this is kind of maybe most relevant for Robert and Pascal. That if you're an indie and you look into acquiring users, let's forget the budgets for a while. But what are the typical channels? What are the channels that you would consider being good for a game developer?
I think one channels that you kind of want to start at is the social ones. They're easy to get into, they're easy to start with, and you can find your kind of target audience you can test out.
Yeah, I agree with that. That the community, as an indie, definitely, you don't have supposedly a lot of money to break your IP, so they've built on the users that you already have, cater to them, build their love, and this way they will share, and that's your start. And it's also part of your retention, so anything else you would do, you actually get a better impact over time, a better long-tail impact, if you already have the community going before it, so start with that.
What's the, if you, for a while, put change the hat, not Oscar's hat, but the hat for a big publisher, having that deep pockets, so what's the different, you still probably work on social, but what kind of kicks in? In terms of channels, do you then go and expand to networks and how do you kind of play around with this stuff? Moving from that, I don't have any money to actually I have some money to spend.
At some point, if it's a little money, then you probably start doing either some regular UA or UA around the moment you're going to get featured to maximize that featuring. And then you use people like these fine folks, or personally, I use Janos Pere here in First Front a lot. And
he's literally almost like a network.
Yeah, he's doing the data stuff. And yeah. I'm more the guy looking at the mix and trying to find things that indies would be interested in sometimes, finding things that are either cheaper or free. And one thing I do a lot is YouTubers. No, I'm not gonna lie, I'm paying for it and I'm using a lot of money for it. But there is always that one or two YouTubers who may have 500,000 subscribers, 100,000 views a video, and who loves your content so much that you can maybe make him a partner, an ambassador, give him stuff that doesn't cost you a lot of money, and that's also a part of the community manager's job, I think, super fans.
It is about building the community, building the community around your game that will in turn also give you more users, and there you have user acquisition.
So then you guys, like when Indian, I know you guys get a lot of like people like indies asking advice and like, you know, how should I like start with this and what should I do and what's relevant? Like how do you have those discussions? Because obviously, you know, I mean, I was running Unity Ads and it's like obviously you want to understand if there's an opportunity for some company to scale, that they can actually start significantly spend money on marketing at some point. So obviously you want to be very supportive and you want to kind of like build something which is rather like easy to onboard as a self-serve maybe. But how do you have this? I mean, do you have still a lot of indies kind of reaching out and asking for advice, and how do you like what do you actually do for them then?
Yeah, that happens a lot. And I mean, it's important to give them as much advice as we can, scalably, right? So I think both platforms, Unity and Chartboost, are highly kind of self-service minded, I assume. I don't know Unity that well, but so they can do a lot themselves. And then I think what kind of advice we give them a lot of times is, you know, if you know your audience, then, you know, target pretty early. Don't do, you know, too much burst campaigns, or don't do, you know, discovery early on, because for an indie, of course, money is a scarce resource, right? So spend it well in the beginning, and that's kind of the advice we give. We don't want them to spend foolishly with us. We want them to spend smart with us. Basically, that's the kind of advice we give usually.
I would actually a bit disagree, because I would say that, of course, you don't want to spend much because you don't know where the users are. But with like huge networks like we are, it is very easy to scale. And it's like, it depends on where you're targeting, of course. I think the first things for indies to do is to think, okay, what do I want to achieve? Do I want to do a technical launch so I could get users from like Thailand or Vietnam with like 20 cents? So that's not going to be expensive. But then basically this is like my start of the conversation. Like, you should be broad in your targeting. Think what you want. Technical launch, don't go after US, for instance. No, don't do that. But don't start like thinking, like, I mean, I don't know what you meant by saying that like they know where the users are. Like, if they actually launching, they don't really know where the like users are. Like, how do they behave? So I would say target, or like identify first, what do you want to achieve? Technical launch, do you want to know where your bugs are in the game? Go to low-tier countries, Taiwan and so on. And then the next one would be actually to scale up and understand your users more.
Well, my point was mostly that, I mean, I've been an indie myself, and I've done launches with big networks myself, and just on my own experience, I mean, it depends on what kind of budget you have. I mean, if you have a big budget for a burst or whatever, you will do technical launch. Of course, I mean, go big. You can do that with Chartboost or Unity or anyone. But if you don't have that much money, then make your money worth. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's about, you know, and most of the times you do know your users. You may already been on social networks, for instance. You already have an audience. You know kind of what to target. But also, I mean, make sure that the game is solid as well. I mean, get something back, right? I mean, it costs money to acquire a user, and if you need to have your onboarding really solid, right? They need to stick in the game. Don't waste the money that way. Make sure that monetization works. You know, get something back, right? Then and make sure virality works as well. Because I mean, if you can acquire a user that generates another user, then all of a sudden your UA cost is cut in half, right? So it's like, you know, prepare well before you start spending money, right? That's kind of my point. Like, knowing what stage you are.
That is very true. Like, you have to understand what you're doing. Like, you have to have a plan, not just thinking, oh, I'm going to onboard 10 different networks, Facebook, Google, all these ones, and then I'm going to just see where I'm going to put money in.
Yeah, and to add to this, I think it's very important what Johan said, and I saw you nod, so you will agree, that when we say building a community, it's not just put out great content on Facebook. It is also within the game, make sure you have optimized the mechanics, the legit incentives to get people to actually follow you on these networks, because I see some games where sometimes their audience on Facebook is like 1% of their daily active users, others it's 50% because they've honed it, they've optimized it. You want to do that before you spend, so that by the time you spend, you also get the organics out of your spending.
And there needs to be the value, right? I mean, if there's no value, I mean, why would I come back, right? As a gamer.
Exactly.
Yeah, but also as an indie, when you're putting your game out there and you're starting to acquire users, you need to make sure that what Johan said, the monetization of the game is actually working, that you're not just giving away your game and great content, but you can actually also monetize it, you can actually get some revenue back from what you've spent.
But it's also like goes nicely actually, like referring again back to my panel yesterday and back to Janos, that what you said a couple of times yesterday when we discussed more about UA and like social media, and it goes for like whether you're an indie or like superstar spending 100 million a year. If it's not clear what's your objective, like why do you want certain stuff, like probably not do it, right? Like it's like better to go back and do your homework, like why do we want to do this? Like, and then you come down to eventually like, hey, okay, so maybe Thailand because of this and that, and I need to test this and that. So yeah, always know your like stuff you want to do, whether you have $100 or more. Now that kind of sets a little bit like the basis maybe for the discussion, but how's like moving on in terms of like, all right, you know, I'm an indie, I have my great idea of the game, it's kind of coming together, and maybe I have like a little bit money from friends and families and other fools, right? So I'm considering spending a little bit of the money on UA. Where do I start from? Like, what's the first thing? Like I'm gonna lost, like, you know? I know there's a lot of people spending a lot of money, and it's tough, and it's difficult, it's competitive. Where do I start from?
I would say just start with metrics, gather data. If you don't have data of what your users, what your gamers, what your players are doing in the game, what the retention rate is, what your monetization rate is, what are your gamers doing? So collect that data and get an attribution platform that you can trust. If you don't have that, I think you need to go take a step back. You don't want to do UA before you have analytics and an attribution provider.
And this goes to like, is there specific tools that you would kind of recommend? Like,
well, obviously you will use trackers like AppsFlyer, Adjust, Java, all the one you prefer basically. But this point is really important, that you also look at your Facebook demographics, whether you're in soft launch or whatever. At some point you have data, you have some users.
Yes.
So look at who are the biggest spenders, who is staying in the game for the longer, things like that. And you probably want these users rather than the cheapest one. Sometimes, what is cheap? Sometimes you can acquire a user for 50 cents, but he brings back 5. That's a loss. If you acquire for $4 a user that lifetime value is going to be 4.50, that's profitable. So you need to know who this user is. And when I go to Janos to place ads, that's the first thing he's going to ask for me. What's your user demographic? What is their age? What is their territory? What are their psychographics? What are their interests? What do they like? What do they watch? What do they read? And the more you know about your core audience, the easier it will be to find it out there. You'll make mistakes, obviously. Sometimes you're going to try something and the user is not coming from there. But you're not going to spend too much time and money in that attempt if you know who you're targeting, and like Janos said yesterday, if you know what your objective is. Because if you don't know the goal, how do you win? How do you assess that you win?
I start to feel that, Janos, you need to come up. You can stay. You know. And it's like from you guys, from your experience, people reaching out to you as indies, like, do they know what they need to measure? Like, do you have a feeling of? Back at the days, I remember at uni, like still at Amplifier, starting to ramp up the video advertising stuff and doing a little UA. So we had long discussions of people who wanted to start, actually have deep pockets, but didn't have a clue of like, should I actually work with Adjust or AppsFlyer, and can you recommend? And of course, as a network, we couldn't really recommend because like we needed to support everybody who was kind of, you know, viable opportunity or option. But do these guys nowadays know that, like, has it changed? Do people know that, like, this is what I want to measure? I didn't maybe have all the data yet, but
I think the research is still the key. You basically, like, I think every indie should first look at all the options. For instance, attribution partners, right? See all 4 of the main ones and see what the offer is, basically. Do you want to pay for installs? Do you want to pay for clicks? And then put that plan or this research into understanding what is actually matching up with your tech stack. So that's attribution, right? But then, like Robert said, analytics and reporting, that's the key, because yes, you're going to start with Facebook, for instance, right? But if you don't understand what the users are doing, and if you don't have those tooling in, that's going to be problematic. Now, then already that time, you should also think about scaling later, because later you're not going to add any more tools. Like, you're not going to want to, like, change your analytics because your game is really big, right? So these are kind of like the things that, like, they are, of course, everybody's still asking. I don't think it's ever going to go away, but the research and, like, understanding what are the kind of key players out there, it's really, really important. And then match it to your own game, because they're very different, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, that it's very hard for us we can't give advice on who to use, because we have to support everyone. But that information is relatively easy to come by, though. I mean, like evaluations of different attribution partners or mediation tools and stuff like that. I mean, that's talk to someone at a conference, talk to someone, like you, or talk to someone who's not from a network, but experienced in Janos, there we go.
Same guy.
So I mean, you talk to a few industry people in a conference, and you have a really good picture of who you should use. I mean, that assessment is relatively easy.
That's what's so great about games industry and, like, Pocket Gamer, because I mean, it's very, like, open community in a way. Like, people are happy to advise, right?
And I think Päivi mentioned something very important as well, and that's the scaling part. Because when you're choosing a provider, when you're choosing an analytics platform, you don't want to end up in a situation where you suddenly get hundreds of thousands of users and your bills is just increasing, and you don't know what to do, and you kind of need to either switch off your servers or switch off your attribution provider, and you don't want to end up in that thing. And that's something that we learned as well. We grew crazy much in a very short time period, and you learn by your mistake. And take a look at those contracts. It's quite boring, but look at the contracts and look at what that will mean. That contract will mean for you if you have 10,000 users, 100,000 users, 500,000 and 5 million users, because that may happen.
That's a very good point, because often, guys, when I talk with like early studios and just playing with numbers, playing this, like, a bit of, like, people don't like to do that because, like, it's pushing my luck. But let's just, like, mapping it down, and I think that makes perfect sense, because mapping it down in terms of like DAUs, but then, like, okay, so at this point, maybe I start pushing more money to UA. There's different things, but, like, but sadly enough, this is typically not the core competence of a new games company, right? Because you have, like, developers, designers, stuff like that. So, but yeah, I mean, it's good always to ask for help from people in the industry.
I think that would be maybe the first advice for indies, based on what you just said, that usually it's not their core competency. You have friends. No matter how young and how small you are, you have friends. Maybe one of them has studied economics. Maybe one of them has studied what it takes to become your data analyst. Find the guy. I wouldn't advise an indie developer to develop that competence on top of everything else he already knows.
Fully.
Because to become an expert, he doesn't have the time. So find a friend who will do it for you.
And again, like, when you play with numbers, there's a point where hopefully you grow, and there's a moment, hey, at this point, maybe it's the time for actually, getting a UA manager in to look after these things. There's agencies.
Yeah, and at this point scares me, because it's usually too late.
Well, that's
Trust
true.
me.
That's
sometimes
true.
you arrive and you think, shit, if only they had called me 6 months ago, could have saved them.
But
it's too late.
I think getting an expert in is definitely worth it early, and it doesn't have to be someone that's super well connected and hasn't been the super expert in UA. It needs to be someone that's smart and good at analytics
and can focus on that.
And can focus on it. And it doesn't have to be full-time either, but it needs to be someone that can, but someone that can work really well in Excel, for instance. That's pretty much what you need, because you don't have to be rocket science to kind of evaluate the different metrics. As long as you know what you want to do and kind of what you're okay with in terms of ROI or retention and stuff like that, kind of results you're okay with. As long as you have those metrics clear for you, the person evaluating that doesn't have to be, rocket science again. But the person needs to be smart and pragmatic and good in Excel. And if you get those, then you're pretty well covered.
Yeah. Changing gears a little bit, so it's already 2 or 3 years when particularly for games, user acquisition, video has been the format, right? So, as a rule of thumb, you wanna buy users for a game, you need to produce a video, right? But before going to the actual creative stuff and the problems there, are there still other formats that you guys are using and you guys supporting, or some of the old, static, interstitials, banner, whatever, and then moving on also, what's next? That's the jillion-dollar question, actually. But what are you guys using now in terms of beyond video format?
At Next Games, we're trying to use everything, the newest thing, the bleeding edge of ads that we can get out there, because we've seen a clear competitive edge by pushing something new out there. But that's not to say, and video still works really, really well, really, really good across many channels. So as an indie developer, and you don't have to have a crazy great CGR video. It's 5 minutes long and a la all the Hearthstone video that just came out. You can just take a chill, make a GIF even, because it's something movable that works. Something that catches the attention of the viewer, then you're good. If you can get that half-second attention, and then you can get the rest of the 10 seconds view of your GIF, and then you're pretty much set.
Yeah, and sometimes comedy helps as well. When you're small and you don't have a big budget, comedy can be your friend. Not for everyone, of course, not for every genre, but it can be. I look a lot at YouTubers as well. I've given talks yesterday about that. That's one of my things at the moment. Obviously, video ads work. Obviously, Facebook ads work as well. Instagram ads, but it always depends on your own LTV with your title on these networks. If it doesn't work for you, don't force it to think, oh, the rest of the industry does it, I have to do it too.
And I mean, as an indie, you might not go with a crazy 360 video the first thing you do on Facebook. You have to take the step back and test it out.
Although, you can have partners as an indie. And that's a great way to save money, and that brings the barter deal. Barter deals is no money changing hands. If I do a campaign with Pagani, they bring the car, I bring the YouTubers want to see the car. So everybody does it for the 0 or less than usual because you brought 3 things together instead of 2. 2 is a commercial negotiation. 3, maybe we have a party. Partnerships is very important for indie. And don't think for a second that big companies will not look at you. If your game fits, never forget that the really giant companies, their problem is not money. Their problem is creative ideas.
Yes.
So if you have something, go to them.
We're talking about ad formats also. I mean, video is the best performing ad unit. I do want to shout out for Playballs though. That's up and coming. Because what we've seen is that Playballs can work really, really well, or it can work really, really badly. It's like a big span on if you look at conversion between impression to install. But there's so much optimization potential with Playballs. You can measure everything. It's like a game, basically. I mean, and you can optimize it so much. So that what we see that a well-developed or well-crafted Playball that's been optimized performs much better than anything else, basically. That's what we're seeing right now.
All right.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say too, that playables are definitely a big thing right now, and it's new, people actually like it, they will engage with that. However, it's a very good point that it also might not work. It might not bring up your performance because it's a playable, right? But just quickly jumping back to the fact of the banner ads, not video, I would say that with I think 95% of all developers, like they basically don't put any budget into banner advertising. So I wanted to ask you, like, because you guys support banners, right? Because we don't. Unity is only video. But how much is that kind of like scale-wise? Like, do you get a lot of budget for?
Best thing ever.
Really? Really?
No, so there's still a lot of spenders in banners, and well, but banners has in static interstitial basically. So an interstitial, but that's static, and that's that was the original. That's like the ad format a few years ago, right? And it's not used as much anymore, but it still converts though. It's still, and it's usually cheaper also. So and if you don't have the resources to make a video, then making a static is really easy, right? And you can optimize that as well, and it can also pay off really well for you in terms of ROI and that. So our biggest, most important ad format is video, and the most exciting ad format is playable, but we still have a lot of static interstitial. And it works as well. And again, it's much easier to produce, much cheaper to produce.
Well,
it could be a good start.
Exactly the point for kind of in this, because I mean, yeah. Producing a video, I mean, there's obviously people who can help you producing a great video, but that's not anymore an advice you get on, like here. That's actually a production which costs money, right? But again, like when we were Päivi at Unity, as we saw this clear difference of like how I think we used the term like video kind of pre-qualifies the user, a gameplay video actually. So kind of coming back to this kind of like super expensive productions of like a trailer of like a brand. It's more like a brand awareness rather than actually showing the gameplay video. We showed them back at the days like huge difference between actually engaging users who are coming back. Like retention was a lot higher for people who saw the gameplay rather than just a trailer of like, hey, this company presents and stuff like that.
In a way, you're right, and what Johan said makes perfect sense to me, because I remember those days where I didn't have a video agency and I needed to do static. But when I think about Eden Games and Gear Club, I realized that we have the luxury to have a video director in-house, so does seriously with Ville Lipisto, and that's a huge advantage. And it's a very, very sensible investment that I would give as an advice to any indie developer. In the same way that you have a friend that studies economics, you have a friend who wants to become a film director. He's going to take 15 years to get there. Giving his first shot is going to be cheap, and he's going to give you great work, and video is becoming so important, not only in ads, but also social media, that this guy is a great hire to make. And don't forget that, to me, when I look at an indie, obviously there are very different definitions of the word indie, and independent is one thing, but when we talk about indie, really, we think about the rock bands of yesteryear, and those guys who got together at school, 3 or 4 of them. I can do graphics, you can do coding. Well, get more friends. Get a film guy. Get more friends who can maybe do the games, but they can help you sell it. And it's if you want to stay indie, this is crucial. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to stay indie for a week and then sell out to a publisher.
Yeah. So in terms of creatives, do you guys help with creatives? If somebody wants to start stuff and, like, I have this great game, I have screenshots, there's like, you can see the gameplay, but can you help me producing a video that then you can use in your network?
Yeah, we do. We do. Video, playables, static, we do, definitely.
Yeah, same. Basically, we can help out. But of course, there are like the agencies that you can use to create videos. It's not actually that expensive. Like, I feel like, I mean, yeah, of course, if you can get somebody in-house, that would be perfect. But if you don't, then, I mean, start off with like 2 videos, 30 seconds, make that same video into 15 seconds. That's already 2 videos. You should test them out, right? And to actually pay like $300 for those 2 videos from an agency, that's not the end of the world, right? And you can still keep using them. And those assets, like all these like banners and everything you want there.
Yeah. You mentioned something important though, that, I mean, you need to test A, B, C, D, whatever. Like, you need to have set of stuff that you test and drive, because that's the only thing, because like going back to Outfit 7, when we're starting to like proper like ASO in terms of like logos on the store and screenshots. I mean, we always had a great idea that, when we had like 4 alternatives, that this is the best, we love it. And it was never the winner after the test. It was probably doing very well, but something else, like, because we are too close, we are too biased of like, okay, so we did this, we worked on this stuff for last year, and we're gonna love this character needs this kind of hat and stuff like that. It's cool, but you know, the audience actually decides, and they need to decide, right?
I think that's very important. What Mika just said, that don't decide yourself what's a good creative. Don't decide yourself what's a bad video or a good video. Just let the numbers tell you, because that if you trust the numbers instead, that's your core audience. They're telling you what they like, and then iterate over that video.
Yeah.
And as you said, if you have a 30-second video, you can easily cut that down into even 3 different pieces, 10, 10, 10. And you have 3 videos that you can test against each other.
But also here, like, it's like kind of like the extreme I've seen is that the data is so high in the priority that it kind of drives your creative like framework. And well, I mean, there's obviously, particularly for you guys, because you have an IP you work with, but like, I think data is still it's the tool that helps you, right? You need to be creative, and then the data helps you to figure out what works. But like, I've seen projects where like, yeah, this is the set we have, and you need to stay in this small, you know, silo and do the best creative. And you kind of tie into the hands of actual artists.
And I think that's why I love to have an in-house video director so much, because you can test so much more than with an agency. A test with an agency costs
And he's
more
in the
money.
team. He knows,
Yes.
you know.
And you can test wild things, because yes, you should look at the data, but that doesn't mean you should narrow your mindset too early in the game. You should still A/B test something wild every
And then
now
you trust the data,
and if it
right?
fails, you turn it down,
Exactly.
and then that's it, move on. You kicked the ball once. But try it, because Robin Squire, if I remember last year, said on stage, if for the cover of Nirvana, Smell Like Teen Spirits, we had A/B tested images, I don't think it would have come out with a baby chasing a dollar bill in a pool. And yet it's one of the most iconic covers of all time. So allow yourself to be creative and artistic. If you just look at the data of other people and then try something within that data set, and
Yes.
you're becoming robotic then and bland, and you're not bringing anything to the entertainment business overall.
That's probably why analysts are not creators.
Exactly. But that's a really good point. Let the creators be crazy and then A/B test their
Analyst
stuff.
kind of like looks into
But
like
don't
raw
assume
stuff.
too
Okay.
much, and don't give them too much direction early, because the spontaneity is going to get away, and that's very important from them.
What we also found out at some point at Outfit 7, that once we started to introduce, like just on ASO, introduce logo of a game on a store, which we canned 8 months ago. Didn't work. We reintroduced that on ABCD test, and that was like winner, like by far. It's like, all right. It's kind of like just, again, you know, refreshing the stuff, and it was cool then. And now it's like, okay, it's popping up again.
I think to Pascal's point is really important in the beginning of the iteration process. It's really important to be really creative. And if you want to try, you know, 3, 4 different creatives toward each other, they have to be completely different in the beginning. Then you can kind of learn, okay, what seemed to be working, and then you iterate on them and change smaller things. But in the beginning, yeah, make it completely different. That would be my advice.
I also at one point, like what I recently discovered is that, for instance, strategy games, you can put different features in that you're gonna see that these are working better. So strategy games, they don't put in gameplay that much anymore. But for instance, one developer discovered that if they put in submarines, they're gonna get the best users. But the game has nothing to do with submarines, but the video does, because this is gonna define the best strategy male users. So, but just putting that one feature into that ad, or like the creative, that works for them. But like, again, this is exactly like you start broad, you have like kind of gameplay videos, and then you're gonna learn the data. You're gonna see that, okay, so this feature works better, this doesn't, I'm gonna push this for the other video, and so on. Yeah.
Interesting. It's a little bit edgy, kind of like, but again, what do you say? You like trying like even crazy things, like don't limit yourself. We're gonna have a few minutes time, a few minutes left, so we might want to jump back to the topic, ongoing UA for indies. I mean, we kind of missed that, but so we discussed the formats and how to start and like the metrics and stuff, but like, you know, I'm in India, I have a game, and then I have my metrics in place, and I'm kind of like, okay, I can get a little bit more money to like, okay, try this out. How do you not necessarily scale, but how do you build that as an operation which is ongoing? Maybe you spend, I don't know, $1,000 a week, but like, and does it make sense? Because it's not a lot of money.
I wouldn't spend $1,000 a week. I would save that money until I can do something better. But yeah, ongoing UA, I think the key word is rhythm. You want your team to put out regular updates every 3 to 5 weeks maximum, because then it gives you an opportunity to do marketing again, to do another video, to relaunch, to do something around it. If nothing goes on in the game and it becomes stale, what can you do as a marketeer? And let's never forget that we all depend of having a fantastic product to begin with. None of us here can sell shit, if I may use a French word. So it's really important to keep that rhythm, and same thing on social media and ads. And like you said earlier, sometimes an ad that was performing really well for 3 months, well, now everybody's seeing it and we're bored with it, so switch. And if game is a service, then marketing is a live show. It's no longer, oh, we made this and now it's done. It's never really done. If they keep remaking the game, we keep retooling the marketing.
I think the main thing is put the money where it's spent effectively. Like, analyze the data, kill the channels that are not making any money back, but just like, this is how you eventually ongoingly scale your business. Like, choose where you're putting the money in.
Fully agree. And also get a process in place. Try to automate as much of the analysis as possible. And get a process in the way you work as well. So, if you do optimizations, do it maybe in the same time of the day or something like that. I mean, make it into process that you can also optimize, right? So become more efficient.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, it needs to be continuous. Like, you need to be on top of these kind of numbers all the time, because, like, at fatigue and all these things. So with the same back at the days when we pushed a lot of these, like, monetization SDKs to guys out there. So what typically happened at that time, and still happens, that you integrate whether that's Unity ads or chart, whatever, and you just leave it. Team, okay, I integrate a couple of ad networks to show ads, and then, that's there. They're doing good. But you're not, like, managing it, and that happens often. I mean, UA is not that bad, because people typically who do that, they kind of understand, but then it needs to be, like, you need to be very spot on. But hey, sorry, we need to cut down soon, so I want to have 2 quick questions. Brief answers, like 5 words, no, maybe a little more. 1, biggest mistake you can do when you're an indie and you want to start doing UA? Biggest mistake?
Spend money without data.
Start being aggressive when you're absolutely not ready. In many ways of the term, it can be that you don't have the little TV. It can be that your game is actually more looking like a prototype and you're the only one not seeing it. There are so many things for which you might not be ready, and if you start too early, obviously if you're a big company, you have the luxury to, correct your mistakes by throwing money at them. As an indie, you don't have that luxury. So sometimes you get impatience when you're in the creative process. You're just tired of working on that thing for a year now, and you just want to get it out. Don't forget that the way you come out is important, and if you have little money, maybe you don't have a second chance. So yeah, make sure you're ready.
Yeah, be involved in the campaigns, especially in the beginning. Not just to make sure that the money are wisely spent, but also to learn. It's a lot of learnings you can get very quickly. So.
Yeah, just to add in here is, like, have a plan. Like, know what you're doing. Like, don't just start, like, kind of going crazy and I'm going to implement everything and I'm integrating this, but, like, actually have a plan. So that's the biggest mistake, of not having a plan. Yes. I turn it around, yes. It's the other way around, so I was, yes.
And my last question was, what's one advice you have? And maybe all of these things we just turn around, and that's the advice, right? So, like, have your data, like, have your plan, like, know what you're doing, actually, that's the point. And, like, I've seen, whether you're indie or a big publisher, there's always, like, you easily fall in love also for the product. So, and either that means that you kind of, like, you just work on too long for it, or then you're gonna, like, just like you pushed for, I need to get this out,
And one more advice I would insist on: get your friends around you. Don't think that you know everything or that you can learn everything. You could maybe theoretically learn everything, but over several lifetimes, which you don't have. Timing is everything.
Yeah. Cool. Good. Thanks, guys. I ran out of my I have more, but like
All right,
later.
let me chuck something at you, because this is all great, and I absolutely totally agree with all of it. There's one little tinge of doubt I have about A/B testing, although I am a huge fan of it, and that is the Heisenberg principle. I know this is quantum theory and it's nothing to do with games and all that kind of stuff, but there's this thing about uncertainty which is really interesting, which is observation affects behavior. And I wonder, if you think about things like, you know, obviously I'm obsessed with Rocky Horror Show. Rocky Horror Show, if that went out, you know, based on its first few weeks, the film would never exist anymore. It would be gone. And yet, it's the longest running cinema release in history. And that's why I'm wondering if we're actually missing some tricks. Now, 99.9 reoccurring % of the time, the A/B testing is probably about right, and let's face it, most of our judgment is bad. But are we missing a trick? Because our very active A/B testing things too early, we don't know how that brand, that identity, that technique, that ads planning will affect the observation, perceptions, and cultural surroundings for the game. So, I don't know, I'd like to see what you think is, are we judging too quickly all the time?
I think the best marketeers have to have the humility to understand that they work for a creator. And if they don't and end up putting shackles on this creator, everybody's going to suffer. We are not creators, and sometimes we have to step back. And sometimes the gut of a genius prevails. And that's it. Human beings.
I think that there's bigger risk actually to acting too late and requiring too much data, you know, because the best, in my experience, the best A/B testing is when you get directional enough kind of thing. Like, okay, this assessment here is good enough, right? It's 75% confidence interval.
It's a strong enough indication.
Yeah,
of the
it's good
trend,
enough, right?
maybe.
Because I want to go in this. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, because if you wait too long and you collect all the data, be completely certain, and make sure you don't miss any little pocket of valuable inventory, then no, you first of all never certain. But if you wanted that kind of influence, it costs a lot of money and time, right? And if you're an indie, you don't have, well, you don't have either. Maybe you have time, but not definitely money. So I mean, my advice is still, you know, directional is kind of good enough, unless you're really big and, you know, need that. So it's a great question, though. All A/B testing is so important. And
yeah, cool. I mean, I don't necessarily, you know, it was a devil's advocate question as much as anything. The reality is most of the time, even people who think they know what they're doing, like me, don't. When it comes down to it, all we know is what happened previously. We can't predict what's going to happen next.